We mentioned in recruiting here at the very bottom right, as you're deep canvassing, you make small asks of folks and you move them up the ladders of engagement. So real quick, we'll talk about ladders of engagement. It's the idea of having a series of steps where you start from very small, very easy asks so that somebody can very quickly take action and feel good about it. And as they show interest and as they take those actions and they build confidence and they learn more, you pull them into bigger and bigger organizing steps. And eventually they reach a point where they have been so engaged and learned so much that they themselves are now organizers. And ultimately, that is our goal here as organizers, I feel like, at least. And many of those sources that we've mentioned feel like organizing is partly it's partly almost like a pyramid scheme kind of thing, right? Like I organize to make other organizers, and then they go out and they make other organizers. And that's ultimately how we build a mass movement, except instead of under capitalism being an actual pyramid scheme and all for organizing, it's actually what works. It's actually what builds a movement. So the ladders of engagement are kind of a way of measuring that, of measuring how engaged someone is. And over time, slowly pulling them up to be their own organizer, where they can go off and start training their own organizers underneath them. And that's how we build our big movement.
When I was a community organizer, one of the things we talked about when we were organizing in neighborhoods was that we were trying to organize our way out of a job. Yeah. Right? My goal when I started organizing in the neighborhood was that neighborhood developed its own leadership. That neighborhood developed its own strategies. That neighborhood developed its own, common, goals and things like that. And that I got to move to the next neighborhood over. Right? That I no longer needed to call a meeting every month or every week. That I no longer needed to send out, volunteers to knock on doors, that they were taking care of that themselves, and then I could move on, right? And so that's kind of our goal as organizers, is to, especially like we said, as overextended, overworked organizers, is to develop people to a point that they can take things off our plate, that we can move to other things, that we can work with other people, and they can then autonomously do the work that we were before kind of babysitting and micromanaging and teaching our way through, and then move from there.
Yeah. So, a typical ladder, particularly for digital engagement, is like on the image on the right here, where you start at the bottom. At first, you're just asking people to read, right? And to learn. And if they read and they learn and they like it, then you ask them to share. And if they share it with their friends, some people will never share it. And if they never share it, then they're probably not interested in being an organizer, right? So don't spend your energy on that, right? Spend the energy on the people that are interested in sharing and are interested in moving up to the next level, finding out how to volunteer more. So look at the people who shared and reach out to them and say, hey, would you like to come to our meeting on Tuesday? Would you like to come to our action on Friday? We have a Green Party social event on Sunday. Would you get them involved somehow. You ask them to come volunteer. And then that's a small ask. You say, hey, just come to our meeting for an hour. Just there's going to be a rally at the city building. The city council building or whatever, just for an hour on Friday. Can you do that? The people that start showing up to those events, now you know that those are people that are really interested in being involved. So you can start asking them to do more. Instead of showing up for an hour, like, hey, can you help organize an event on Friday? Can you bring the signs, right? Like, we'll do all this stuff. Can you bring
host a sign making party?
Right, exactly. Can you host a sign making party and bring the signs for the event? You start to get them more and more engaged and have more and more responsibility within the movement as they go up the ladder. And eventually, like I said, they reach to the point where they are now leaders of the movement. They are leaders of the Green Party. They are organizers themselves who now know what to do. And they can branch off and say, this is where we were saying earlier for the Green Party Pittsburgh, for example, they have the skills to say, I'm going to go form a working group on the things that I want. And they know how to do the same ladder model for the thing that they're doing. Let's start a new working group. We've built up more members. We're ready. We're going to start a new working group on this thing. And they could start the ladders over again. Start educating people on issues. Start making people share. Start making people show up to events. You do the same thing over again until you keep building your capacity. Now this is digital engagement, but of course it can be in-person engagement too. It's same sort of thing, right? Do you show up to a meeting? Do you show up to an action? Do you show up to a planning meeting? All these things. You pull people up.
And don't be worried when some people fall off, right?
Yeah.
Every rung, you're going to have people where that rung is their threshold, and that's okay, right? Maybe that's where they always stay, and that's okay. And maybe it takes time and relationships and things that happen in their lives to advance them. Some people will leapfrog steps, right? Looking at the ladder, this from Salsa Labs, which is a digital, focused thing, but it's a really good picture of the ladder, right? Which is why we used it. But there's people who will share your stuff every day and who will donate online, but will never come in person. And it could be a comfort thing. It could be an ability thing, right? It could be a scheduling and resource thing. So it's not even necessarily that, obviously it'd be great if every person became an organizer. But not becoming an organizer doesn't mean that someone is less valuable necessarily to the organization, right? They can fill different roles at different levels, and those roles and levels, those roles can adjust over time.
Yeah. Somebody that doesn't come to meetings but is otherwise very engaged could be your social media director. It's there's not really one ladder. There's multiple ladders, multiple paths, and it's allocating people to, calling back to like our first slide, I think it was, pulling people toward important tasks in our movement that also fit their interest and skills.